1460 WVOX.
Here's a picture of the neighborhood.
Here's the corner where we stood.
And now, Whitney Media 1460 WVOX presents Nora's Neighbors. Meet interesting people from Westchester and vicinity who are your neighbors and Nora's neighbors. Now on 1460 WVOX, here's your host, Nora Murphy.
Hi, welcome to Nora's Neighbors, an hour of interesting conversation with interesting people from in and around Westchester. Art is a world that comes with lots of labels, at least it does if you grew up when I did, and some are often misunderstood. When I think of still life, I think of paintings of bowls of fruit and flowers, but it's so much more than that. And my guests today are here to alter my ideas and perhaps yours. Elizabeth Saperstein from the Pelham Art Center has assembled The Things Themselves, an exhibit which opens tomorrow night. Kevin Klein and Scott Seaboldt are two of the artists whose works are part of the exhibit. And they're here to talk today about still life, artists, inspiration, and whatever else comes to our mind. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's good to have you here. Let's begin with still life. We started this conversation, but I do think of bowls of fruit and flowers. What is still life if you were going to define it as an art form? Either one, any one of the three of you. Don't all speak at once, folks.
Okay, still life as an art form, it really is it's a broad category in art, and it encompasses not just bowls of fruit and flowers, but books, any kind of arrangement of objects that are commonly found in a domestic setting. That's generally what we think of when we think of still life. So, for example, if you think of 17th century or 16th century Dutch painting, that's often considered the first group of painters and painting that established the still life as an independent painting genre. You would find pictures of not just beautiful vases full of overflowing flowers, but also books, pens, writing instruments, musical instruments, actually. And also, there's another topic which we'll get to that you would find in these still life paintings, which are skulls. And so you have to remember, too, when you're looking at still life, and this is something that we try to bring into the show, is that still life painting often references the passing of time and the rhythms of daily life and things of that nature.
You're calling the show The Things Themselves. Why?
We kept running into the term, the things themselves, in literature. In the writings of Vincent van Gogh, in the writings of Leonardo da Vinci, Greek philosophy, there was very often a reference to this idea of the things themselves in terms of observing nature. Leonardo talked about it in terms of not copying other artists, but there's such an abundance of natural things around us that all we need to do is look at what's around us and we can find inspiration from it. Van Gogh talked about it in similar terms. So the Greek philosopher that we've quoted in the show, it's not the things themselves that trouble us, but our thoughts about those things, Epictetus. And so there's an element, too, of that in the show, which is these objects that we surround ourselves in our domestic spaces. Do they make us, nervous? Do they somehow represent feelings of anxiety about these objects that we've acquired? So there's a lot of different ideas about that.
What about you two? You've got works. You're two of the 23 artists whose works are being exhibited. What will we find when we go, Scott, that you have put, or that's been selected of your work for the exhibit?
Well, excuse me. Let's see. I do a couple different ways of going at things. Currently, I've been looking at painters of the past, not too far, Paul Cézanne recently, and kind of looking at the way in which they went about still life in that period. I guess it would be post-impressionism, but it was kind of a way of easiest passage of painting. the things that were in the still life were the sundry items of either the studio or of the house, but they weren't laden with meanings. There were periods in still life where it really was about talking about some moralizing and things like this. And I think during the Impressionist and Post-Impressionist period, it was a little bit more luxurious time. The studio was kind of a place where you could bring things in. The time was passing without political interruptions, and it was kind of a more quiet time, so there wasn't a lot of moralizing in the painting that we see of Impressionism and some of Post-Impressionism. So I kind of like Cezanne. I really think he's an important painter in all of my work, but especially in focusing on his still lifes. I find that he's able to more formally deal with the act of painting itself, and I enjoy working with still life because it literally is almost, at least for myself, devoid of moral implication. I don't bring a lot into it in both when I work from another artist's work, which in this, the painting that is at the Pelham Art Center, is basically a pastiche or something like this. It's pretty recognizable if you know Cezanne's work, but I've done it on multiple canvases, and it's in a multitude of different styles. Not really obviously in different styles, but different modes of paint application. And I think that a lot of artists try to do that, and they try to change, and they keep themselves really invested in the act of painting as opposed to trying to tell a story. So you're kind of doing two sides. We talked about the things themselves, and that's the depiction of the things themselves. And then there's, what was the line? Our relation with them.
Oh, yes. It's not the things themselves, but our thoughts about them.
Yeah, the thoughts about them. So I try to leave the thoughts out and just deal with the things themselves. And that allows you to work with the medium. And so in the painting, it's more about taking an already kind of set up still life that has been well represented in art history and kind of letting my own studio take over on that painting and kind of work it.
Reinterpret it.
Yeah, reinterpret it a little bit, and I think it's a bit of an homage to the painter, but more it just leaves me off the hook a lot of ways. I mean, it's already kind of set up ahead of time, So.
Kevin, what about you? Are you off the hook?
Oh, I don't know. I want to comment on that. Like Scott, I'm a big fan of Cezanne too. I think he made a really, really good case for continuing to paint observationally after the camera was invented. Which sort of stole the thunder of an awful lot of painters. But in this particular case for this show, my work that's in there, I'm, I guess, not as involved in the formal, luxuriating in sort of the formal issues, but I am actually interested in those thoughts about the objects that trouble us. And I'm looking a little farther back into art history. I think it's one of the nice things about painting in a genre, sort of a well-worn genre like this. People say, there's nothing left to do. Everything has been done. But I haven't done everything. I can go and do it, and as I'm doing it, I'm communing with the person who did it before me or dealt with this issue before me. It's nice painting in a really, in a genre like still life that has this rich history and tradition. I'm going back a little farther. I'm a big fan of a painter named Hans Holbein, sort of German-Swiss painter who danced around and dodged all sorts of troubles during the Reformation, and ended up in England as the court painter for Henry VIII, and did lots of portraits. But he dealt with a lot of objects, and there's certainly one really big famous painting, The Ambassadors, which has got it's portrait of a couple of British ambassadors to France or French ambassadors to England. I should know this, but can't remember exactly. But there's this weird smear down at the bottom. Everything is really magnificent, precisely detailed and rendered in oil paint, and this is weird smear down at the bottom. And if you get down on your knees and you stand off on the side of the canvas and you look at it from an angle where all that precise detail isn't legible, the thing that is legible is that smear, and that smear is a skull. And it's a little, I don't know, again, but those end up in the Vanitas paintings or the Memento Mori paintings an awful lot to remind us of our mortality. Or I think in many cases, these folks would have people who might employ someone like Hans Holbein they'd pay him to paint them sort of in their best outfit, holding the tools of their trade, and just a real indulgence, or it's a fairly vain thing to go and do. And they'd have a little skull here, a little candle that had just been snuffed out, or is about to get snuffed out, or a little piece of fruit with some bugs crawling on it. References to yes, maybe it looks like I'm being vain, but I really know this is all fleeting, and we're going back to ashes and dust to dust. And there seemed to be something kind of insincere, but it's wonderful painting, but there's something kind of insincere about that part of it. So what I did, I love Hans Holbein, I love that imagery, images laden with meanings and symbolism, and what I wanted to do in these paintings, and you'll see it's a few, I think there's skulls, there's human skulls and monkey skulls, and there's some sausages lying around, a cleaver and things like that. I feel like I tried to, I guess, luxuriate in my communing with Hans Holbein, but also give maybe a more, what I feel like a more honest spin is on this this notion of considering your mortality. And I always feel like we don't really do it that much, or maybe we kind of try not to think about it. We put it aside. Maybe we're not really dealing with these symbols of mortality and the way we think about them, so gravely and seriously. Maybe we're kind of being a little casual with that issue of mortality. So I tried to give them the spin they probably really get, or really ought to get. So
Skulls. That's fascinating. You had mentioned that to me, Elizabeth, but I didn't know what that meant.
Oh, yeah. As a matter of fact, this show came about because our gallery advisory committee at the Pelham Art Center, which meets fairly regularly to get together and come up with ideas for shows, and I'm on that gallery committee. And the original idea was to have a show of vanitas art, and we thought about that, and what would it be like to have a show that was just the entire subject matter would be about the passing of time and meditations on death, and we thought that might be a little too much. So we figured
It would
that
be hard to draw people in.
So we said, well, you know what? But the still life tradition, as as we were saying, it is so broad, and in art history, it's broad too. I mean, you have from right up to the to the pop artists of the 1960s, Andy Warhol, Roy Lichtenstein. They were also working in this genre. You have Scott mentioned the Impressionists, and so you really can go through the whole of art history and find that this subject matter has been explored by so many of the great artists. And so we said, well, why not just open it up then to still life in general, and let's look at other media, and let's look and see what sculpture is what's going on with sculpture. Let's see what's going on with digital photography. Let's see what's going on with videos. Anybody are there any video artists working out there today who are inspired by still life? And that's what we found, and we did put that together in this show.